One day, as the sun rose high over the hills of Galilee, an enormous crowd gathered on the grassy slopes, their eyes fixed on a single figure, Jesus of Nazareth. Word had spread far and wide of his miracles, his teachings, and the hope he inspired in the hearts of all who listened. Men, women, and children flocked from nearby towns and distant villages, eager to hear words of wisdom and see the wonders for themselves. The crowd was immense, numbering 5,000 men, not counting the women and children who accompanied them. It was a sea of expectant faces, each person drawn by faith, curiosity, or the longing for something greater. As the day wore on, Jesus spoke to the crowd, sharing parables and truths that touched the deepest parts of their souls. Hearts were stirred, and the people clung to every word. But as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, a practical concern arose. The disciples noticed the growing restlessness among the crowd. They approached Jesus, saying, "Master, it's late. The people are hungry, and there's nowhere nearby to buy food. Should we send them away to find something to eat?" The disciples, ever practical, looked at the vast numbers and saw an impossible problem. How could they possibly feed so many with their limited resources? But Jesus, full of compassion, replied, "You give them something to eat." The disciples were bewildered. How could they, with barely enough for themselves, provide for thousands? Among the crowd, a young boy stepped forward. In his hands, he held a small lunch, 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. It was meager, barely enough for one family, let alone thousands. Yet the boy offered what he had, trusting that even the smallest gift could make a difference in the hands of Jesus. Jesus took the loaves and fish, and before the entire crowd, he looked up to heaven and gave thanks. It was a simple act, gratitude for provision, no matter how small. Then he broke the bread and began to distribute it. The disciples moved among the people, handing out pieces of bread and fish. To their amazement, the food did not run out. In fact, it seemed to multiply with every hand that received it. The loaves and fish were stretched, portioned, and passed from person to person. And still, there was more. The crowd ate, not just a bite or a taste, but until each person was satisfied. Children giggled with delight as their hunger vanished. Parents smiled as their little ones ate their fill, and the elderly marveled at the abundance before them. What had begun as a small offering became a feast for thousands. When everyone had finished, the disciples gathered the leftovers. Astonishingly, 12 baskets were filled with fragments of bread and fish, more than what they had started with. This miracle was more than just a display of supernatural power. It was a lesson in faith, generosity, and the boundless provision of God. The boy's simple lunch, given freely, became the seed for a miracle. His willingness to share, even when it seemed insignificant, opened the door for Jesus to demonstrate that nothing is too small for God to use. The disciples, who had doubted and questioned, witnessed firsthand how trust and obedience could lead to unimaginable results. The miracle of feeding the 5,000 speaks to us even today. It reminds us that in moments of scarcity, when our resources seem inadequate, we are invited to bring what we have to Jesus. Whether it's our time, talents, finances, or even our faith, no gift is too small. When we surrender what little we have, God can multiply it beyond our wildest dreams. What matters is not the size of the gift, but the heart with which it is given. This story also teaches us that God's provision is abundant and overflowing. The 12 baskets of leftovers are a powerful symbol. Not only did Jesus meet the immediate need, but he provided more than enough. In God's economy, there is no shortage. His generosity exceeds our expectations, and his blessings often come in ways we could never predict. For those feeling overwhelmed by life's challenges, the miracle of multiplication offers hope. It's a reminder that we are not alone in our struggles. When we turn to God and offer our burdens, he is able to transform them into blessings. The crowd came to Jesus hungry, seeking answers, and left satisfied, their needs met in ways they could not have imagined. The story of Jesus feeding the 5,000 is also an invitation to look beyond our limitations. The disciples saw only what they lacked, But Jesus saw possibility. He challenged them to trust, to step out in faith, and to participate in the miracle. In our own lives, we often focus on what we don't have: time, resources, energy, or ability. Yet Jesus calls us to offer what we do have, believing that He can use it for a greater purpose. Sharing this story is an act of encouragement. It's a way to inspire others to trust in God's provision and to believe in the power of faith. The miracle reminds us that small acts of generosity can spark great change. Just as the boys' lunch became a feast, our acts of kindness, compassion, and service can multiply and ripple outwards, touching lives in ways we may never see. For families, children, and communities, the lesson is clear. No one is too small or insignificant in the eyes of God. Everyone has something to offer, and every gift matters. When we come together in faith and unity, miracles can happen. As we reflect on this story, let's remember to approach life with gratitude, faith, and generosity. Let's be willing to give, even when it seems like we have little. Let's trust that God can take our offerings and multiply them for His glory. Let's encourage one another to believe in the power of provision, knowing that with God, nothing is impossible. So, as you go about your day, consider what you have in your hands. It may seem small, but in the hands of Jesus, it can become more than enough. Share your gifts, your time, your kindness, and your faith. Watch as God works in and through you to bless others. Let the miracle of multiplication inspire you to live with open hands and a generous heart. And if this message encourages you, remember to share it with others. Spread the story of God's wonders, how faith, generosity, and trust can transform lives. Let's celebrate the miracles that happen when we bring what we have to Jesus and watch as He multiplies it beyond our imagination.